Okay, so you want to own a food truck. The pitch is beautiful, and almost everyone who buys one has heard it. It's a restaurant without the rent. All the cooking, none of the crushing monthly check to a landlord. Here's the problem. You did not escape the rent. You escaped the address. And it turns out the address was the asset. A restaurant sits in one place, and every day it accumulates people who know where it is. A food truck has to go out and win its customers back from scratch every single morning. And the best places to park, the ones with the crowds, are owned by somebody else who will take a cut because of course they will. Let's start with the thing itself, because the first surprise is the price. People assume a food truck is cheap, and relative to a restaurant, it is. But it is not cheap in any absolute sense. And the gap between what people expect to pay and what a working truck actually costs is where a lot of dreams quietly die. Because you are not buying a vehicle. You are buying a commercial kitchen that happens to have an engine attached to it. And a commercial kitchen is expensive regardless of where you put it. You need cooking equipment, a griddle, fryers, a grill, whatever your menu demands. You need refrigeration that works while bouncing down a road. You need a hood and a ventilation system, and behind that, a fire suppression system because you are operating open flame inside a metal box with propane tanks strapped to it, and the authorities have extremely firm views about that. You need a generator because that kitchen runs on electricity, and there is no wall socket at a festival. You need water tanks, both fresh and waste, because you have to wash hands and equipment, and you cannot simply pour the dirty water into the street. You need the propane system, inspected. You need the electrical system, inspected. And you need it all bolted down hard enough to survive being shaken at highway speed for years. So the honest number is a serious one. And this is where the first trap sits, because there is always a cheaper truck. There is always somebody selling one for a fraction of what a new build costs. And you have to ask why. Sometimes the answer is fine. Somebody got out of the business, life changed, they want it gone. But very often, the cheap truck is cheap because the engine is tired, or because the build was done badly and won't pass inspection in your jurisdiction, or because the equipment is at the end of its life. And here's what makes that so much worse in this business than in any other. If the truck breaks, you don't have a truck with a problem. You have no business at all, that day and every day, until it's fixed. Hold that thought. It comes back, and it's the trap door. All right, you've got the truck. Now let's deal with the thing that everybody who buys a food truck discovers about 6 weeks in, and that nobody mentions in the fantasy. You are still paying rent. Here's why. In most places, you are not legally allowed to run a food business out of the truck alone. You cannot prep tomorrow's food in the truck overnight. You cannot store your inventory in it. You cannot do your deep cleaning in it, or dispose of your wastewater in it, or in many jurisdictions, even park it overnight wherever you like. So you need a commissary, a licensed commercial kitchen, where you do your prep, store your stock, wash down at the end of the night, and park. And you rent it, by the month, from somebody who owns a building. Read that again. The entire premise of the food truck, the thing that made it feel like an escape, was that you would not be writing a monthly check to a landlord for a building. And in reality, you are writing a monthly check to a landlord for a building. It's just a building your customers will never see, that generates no sales, that produces no walk-in traffic, and that adds nothing to your revenue whatsoever. You did not remove the rent. You made it invisible, and you made it useless. And now we come to the real problem. And it is the one the hook was pointing at. Where do you park? Because a restaurant has an address. And an address, it turns out, is doing a colossal amount of work that nobody notices until it's gone. An address means you are on a map. It means people who liked you last month know exactly where to find you this month. It means a person walking past on a Tuesday who has never heard of you sees a sign and comes in. It means regulars. It means a lunch crowd from the office block across the road who have made you part of their week without ever deciding to. A truck has none of that. Every morning, you begin from nothing. And so the single most important operational question in your entire business becomes, where can I stand today? And how many hungry people will be standing there with me? And here is the crushing answer. Almost every good answer is owned by somebody. The corner with the office workers? That's private property, and the owner of that lot will want a fee. The festival with the huge crowd? That's an event. And the organizer charges vendors to be there. Sometimes a flat fee, sometimes a percentage of everything you sell, sometimes both. The brewery that has trucks every night and a crowd of people drinking with nothing to eat? That's a great slot. And it has a rotation and probably a waiting list and possibly an arrangement. The business park, the construction site, the university campus, every single one of them has somebody who controls access, and every one of them understands exactly what your presence is worth. So you did not escape having a landlord. You acquired a new one every single day, and you have to negotiate with each of them, and none of them owe you anything. And then, layered on top of that, comes the part of this industry that outsiders never see, which is the permits. Understand the structure of the problem. A restaurant deals with one city, one set of health inspections, one business license, one fire code, one set of rules, forever. A food truck moves, which means that as you drive across town, you may cross a municipal line, and on the other side of that line is a completely different legal regime, different permit, different fee, different health department with its own inspection on its own schedule, different rules about where you may park, how long you may stay, and how close you may be to a bricks and mortar restaurant, because restaurants pay property taxes and have lobbied hard on exactly this point in a great many places. So your addressable market, the set of places you are actually allowed to sell food, is not a city. It's a patchwork of jurisdictions, and each new patch costs money and paperwork to enter. And you have to keep track of all of them, and keep all of them current, and be able to prove it when somebody in a uniform knocks on your window during a lunch rush. All right, let's say you've got the truck, the commissary, the permits, and a spot. Now let's talk about what actually happens when you open that window, because there is a physical constraint here that governs everything, and almost nobody models it. You have about 2 hours. That's the lunch rush. A queue forms, and it exists for roughly 120 minutes, and then it evaporates. Because people go back to work. Everything you are going to earn that day, you earn in that window. And now ask the question that decides your entire income. How many orders can you physically push through that window in 2 hours? Because it is a hard number. There is one service window. There are 1 or 2 people inside a space roughly the size of a hallway. Every plate has to be cooked, assembled, handed over, and paid for, one at a time. And once the queue is long enough that people at the back can see they'll be waiting 20 minutes, they leave and go and buy a sandwich somewhere else. So your revenue has a ceiling, and it is set by physics, not by demand. You can have 100 people wanting your food and still only be able to serve 60 of them, and the other 40 are not a queue. They're a loss. Which is why the menu on a successful food truck looks the way it does. Small, focused, often built around one thing done well. That isn't purity, or artistic discipline, or a branding decision. It's throughput engineering. Every additional item on the menu adds prep, adds ingredients, adds decision time for the customer, and adds seconds to each order. And seconds, multiplied across a 2-hour rush, are the difference between a good day and a bad one. The truck that sells one excellent thing is not being humble. It's being fast. And while we're inside that window, it's worth looking at what the money actually does on its way through, because the margins here are tighter than the fantasy suggests. Your food costs you real money, and in this industry that's typically a serious fraction of what the customer pays. Then there's labor, and here the truck does something interesting. It caps your staff. Hard, because there is only so much room. You physically cannot put 6 people in there. So your labor bill is smaller than a restaurant's, which is genuinely good. But look at the flip side of that, because it's the same coin. Those 2 people in the truck have to do everything. Cook, assemble, take payment, handle a complaint, restock the fridge mid-rush, and keep the whole thing clean enough to pass an inspection that might happen at any moment. There is nowhere to hide and nobody to cover for you. If one of the 2 people in that box is having a bad day, the day is bad. If one of them is sick, you may simply not open. And then the costs that a restaurant never thinks about at all. Fuel, to move a heavy vehicle to the spot. Generator fuel, running all service. Propane, the vendor fee for wherever you're standing. the commissary rent, the permits, plural, the insurance, which covers a kitchen and a vehicle and public liability all at once, and which is not cheap. So by the time the money from that 2-hour rush has finished being eaten by the food, the staff, the fuel, the generator, the fee, the rent, and the paperwork, the amount left is considerably thinner than the queue outside would suggest. A busy window is not the same thing as a profitable day, and the difference between those two sentences is where most of the disappointment in this business lives. So where does the money actually come from? Let's stack the layers, because the ranking will surprise people. The first layer is street service. The public, the queue, the window, the 2 hours. It is the thing everybody pictures when they picture a food truck. It is also weather dependent, location dependent, capped by throughput, and the least reliable revenue in the entire business. The second layer is the regular slot. The brewery every Thursday. The business park every Tuesday and Wednesday. The office campus on Fridays. These are enormously more valuable than they look because they are recurring and predictable. You know roughly how many people will be there. You know how much to prep. You waste less food. You build actual regulars, the closest thing a truck ever gets to an address. A truck with 4 solid recurring slots has something like a business. A truck chasing whatever it can find each week has a very stressful hobby. And the third layer is the one that changes everything, and it is where the real money in this industry lives. Catering, private events, weddings, corporate lunches, birthday parties, film shoots, company offsites. Look at what a catering booking actually is and compare it to street service, item by item. The volume is agreed in advance, so you know exactly how much food to buy, and you waste almost none. The price is agreed in advance, often per head, at a margin that street service could never sustain. You are frequently paid a deposit before you even show up. There is no queue, so the throughput panic disappears. There is no location fight, because they have told you where to go. And, crucially, there is no weather risk, because a corporate lunch booked for 400 people does not evaporate because it drizzled, which produces a genuinely strange fact about this business, and it's worth saying plainly. The most profitable day a food truck has may involve no members of the public whatsoever. No queue, no window, no crowd. Just a private car park, a pre-agreed number of guests, and an invoice. And once you see that, the whole industry reorganizes itself in your head. Street service is not the business. Street service is the advertising. It is how people find out you exist, taste your food, and remember your name so that when their company needs to feed 200 people, they think of you. You are running a catering company. The truck is your billboard, and the lunch rush is your marketing budget. And catering solves a second problem that street service simply cannot, which is the calendar. Think about what happens to a food truck in winter, in any climate that has one. Nobody queues outside in a metal box's shadow in February. The festivals stop. The office workers eat indoors. The brewery patio is empty. Your street revenue does not decline gently. In a lot of places, it falls off a cliff for months, while your loan payment, your insurance, your commissary rent, and your permit renewals all continue with complete indifference to the season. So a truck that lives on street service is not running a business with 12 months of income. It is running one with perhaps 7 or 8 good ones, and it has to earn a full year in them, which is a structure we have seen before, and it is never a comfortable one. Catering does not care about the weather in the same way. A corporate lunch in February happens in February. A wedding is booked regardless. An office party is scheduled precisely when the weather is worst. So the operator with a strong catering book is not merely earning better margins. They are earning them in the months when everybody else is sitting in a cold truck watching an empty street, wondering how they're going to make the payment. And this brings us to the kindest and most useful thing I can tell you about a food truck, which is what it's actually best at. Look at what a truck genuinely does better than a restaurant. It is dramatically cheaper to start. It can move to where the demand is. Instead of praying, the demand walks past. And it can be closed on a Tuesday without a landlord caring, which means the truck is an extraordinarily good instrument for answering the single most expensive question in the restaurant industry. Does anybody actually want to eat my food? A restaurant answers that question by signing a 10-year lease, spending an enormous amount on a build-out, and then finding out. If the answer is no, the loss is catastrophic. A truck answers the same question for a fraction of the money in a fraction of the time, and if the answer is no, you sell the truck and you have learned something that would otherwise have cost you your house. And if the answer is yes, you now have something a new restaurant would kill for. You have proof of demand, a following that already exists, a menu tested against real customers under real pressure, and a name people know before you have opened a single door. That is why so many of the best small restaurants you have ever eaten in started as a truck. The truck was never meant to be the destination. It was the proving ground. And notice how completely that reframes the purchase. A truck bought as a permanent way of life is a hard, capped, weather-beaten business. The same truck, bought as a 2-year experiment to find out whether the thing you cook is something people will queue for, is one of the cheapest and smartest bets available to anybody who can cook. Same vehicle, same money, entirely different decision depending on what you think it's for. So, the trapdoors. And there are 3, and the first one is the one that separates this business from everything else in this series. Your kitchen and your vehicle are the same object. Think about what that means. In a restaurant, if the oven dies, you have a serious problem and you fix it, and the restaurant keeps operating around it. In a food truck, if the transmission dies, you do not have a kitchen with a problem. You have no kitchen. You have 0 revenue that day and tomorrow and every day until the vehicle is repaired, and the repair is happening at a garage that has never worked on a truck full of fryers and does not know what to do with the propane. Your entire business can be stopped completely by a mechanical failure that has nothing to do with food. And when it stops, you are still paying the commissary rent and the insurance and the loan on the truck, and your staff are still expecting hours you cannot give them. The second trapdoor is the weather. And it is more brutal here than in almost any other business we have looked at because of what it does to inventory. Picture the big Saturday, the festival, the one you paid a vendor fee for, the one you've been building toward. You prep for 4 times a normal day because that's the opportunity. You buy the food. You pay the staff to come in. You are up at 5 and it rains. Nobody comes. And every single thing in that truck is now food you have already paid for that nobody is going to eat, and much of which will not survive to next week. It is not a slow day. It is a day where you spent aggressively and earned nothing. And there is no version of that Saturday you can get back because the festival happens once. And the third trapdoor is the one that closes the ceiling above you. You cannot easily scale. Here's why. And it's worth being precise because we've seen a version of this before, and the reason here is different. When we looked at a vending route, the problem with growth was distance. More machines meant more driving, forever, because the owner was the driver. The problem with a second food truck is not distance. It's that a food truck is not a machine. It is a small, chaotic, live restaurant run by human beings under time pressure in a confined space. And its quality depends entirely on the person in it. So a second truck needs a second cook who is as good as you, and a second driver, and a second permit stack in whatever jurisdiction it operates in, and a second maintenance schedule, and a second set of daily location negotiations. You have not doubled your revenue. You have doubled your problems, and you have added the one problem you did not have before, which is that you now have to be somewhere else while someone else cooks your food with your name on the side of their truck. That is why the food truck world is full of people with one excellent truck and comparatively few with a fleet. The unit does not replicate cleanly because the unit contains a person. So let's answer the question we started with. What do you actually own when you own a food truck? You own a kitchen with an engine, a rent you cannot see, a location you must renegotiate every morning, and a 2-hour window in which to earn your day. What you do not own, and what you gave up on the day you chose wheels over walls, is an address. And the address was the asset. It was the thing quietly doing the work of finding you customers, every hour, for free, whether you were paying attention or not. So, should you buy one? Here's the honest split. The optimistic version goes like this. You build a tight menu around one thing you are genuinely excellent at, engineered for speed. You lock in recurring slots, a brewery, a business park, a campus, so that a real share of your week is predictable and your prep is not a guess. You treat street service as marketing, and you go hard after catering and private events until the invoices, not the queue, are where your money comes from. And you use the truck for what it is uniquely good at, which is proving, cheaply and quickly, that people want what you make. And then one day, if you want to, you take everything you've learned and everything you've built and you sign a lease and you finally get an address, having earned it instead of gambled on it. The harder version looks like this. You bought the truck first because the truck is the exciting part and you worked out the rest afterwards. You are paying commissary rent you didn't budget for. Your permits cost more than you thought and cover less ground than you hoped. You spend your mornings hunting for somewhere to park and your afternoons discovering that the spot you found has no lunch crowd. Your one big Saturday got rained on. And then the transmission goes, and the truck sits in a garage for 3 weeks while the commissary rent, the insurance, and the loan all carry on exactly as before. And notice what decides between those two futures. Almost none of it is the food. You can be the best cook in the city and lose, and that is the cruelty of this business, and also the reason it's worth understanding before you begin. Because in the end, a food truck doesn't sell you freedom from rent. It sells you freedom from an address and then charges you every single morning for a new one.